Okay, so in today's lecture, we'll look at something new, which is how to do input output in Haskell. Okay, yeah, so all these things are ready. So let's just get to the slides. So till now, the way we have done Haskell programs is that a program is a bunch of functions. A function of type A arrow B produces a result of type B on an argument of type A. Okay, this is simple. And you run the programs in GHCA. Okay, so you write the programs in a file, you load the file in GHCA, and you run interactively by invoking the function on various arguments. Okay, and GHCA automatically displays the result on the screen, provided it can be shown. Of course, the result should be printable, or it has to be a type that belongs to the type class show. Okay. Okay. So now, but this is not how you would normally program. I mean, typically you run programs, various programs, and those are programs somebody has written in some language and they've shipped the program to you, and you just invoke the program and it runs. Okay, you don't need to have an interpreter for the language the program was written in. Okay, so there are lots and lots of apps, and what are apps but just programs, and you run those programs normally, without having to run them through some interpreter. We would like to do the same thing with Haskell programs too, because ultimately you would write some program to do whatever task, and then you will ship it to some user, and then they'll have to just run it. And furthermore, something that we have not seen much till now, or we have not seen it formally till now, even though I have included snippets here and there in my programs, is how to do input output, some kind of interaction with users. Okay. So you want to accept a user input midway through a program execution. Maybe you want the user to tell you what to do next, to tell the program what to do next. Okay, and based on that, the program has to do something or the other. And then not just take input from the user, but you also want to print out stuff on the screen saying, okay, at this point, this thing has happened. Okay, even though that is not something that is part of the technically part of the output of the program or output of your function, you want some kind of messages about your program to be written on screen, perhaps. Okay, this is some very simple kind of interaction with users. Okay, and this we want to achieve, but we want to achieve it still keeping in all this has to still be in keeping with the philosophy of Haskell. Okay, so without further ado, we can see that here is a Haskell program which has input output. Okay, at least it does output first. Whether it does input or not, it does output. So these are the two. This is the first command that you will want to know. Put string line. Okay, put a string on the screen and also print a line, meaning a new line character. Okay, put string line. That is what it is called. And you can see here. Okay, I have written a program, and this program has main, and so till now I was invoking GHCI. So I would do GHCI, and then I would load this function, this program file, and then I'll write the function name, which will do whatever I want to do. But suppose I don't want to go to GHCI, what do I do? GHCI stands for GHC stands for Glasgow Haskell compiler. Glasgow Haskell compiler. Okay, and that's the compiler. GHCI stands for the interpreter or the interactive version. Okay, where it interacts with you. You send a, you write some command, it gives you some response. But if you want to just compile the program and run it as a separate program, so you compile it once, it becomes a program. Now you run the program. Now you don't think of Haskell. You just think of it as any old program. Okay, the way to do it is to just say GHC. Okay, you do GHC, meaning apply the Glasgow Haskell compiler on this file name. Lect19 is my file name, lect19.hs, but I can drop the .hs. I can just do this also. Okay, you can see that it produces some responses, and it produces 3 files, as you can see here: lect19.hi, lect19.o, and lect19. Okay, in red color. Okay, and can you see the thing here? This line, can you see I have highlighted it in some lighter color. So can you read the thing on the leftmost? This RWX, R-X, R-X. You can all see it, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So what does it mean? It means that this program has execute permissions. That X there means execute permissions. Okay. Whereas in other things, you will only see RW hyphen, R hyphen hyphen, R hyphen hyphen. Those are simple text files. Those do not have execute permissions. This is an executable, as they say. Okay. So you can run the program. How do you run it? You have to run the program by giving the program name. But so I can run lots of programs. GHC itself is a program name. Okay. I have just given the program name. GHC is a program residing somewhere in my system. I can find out on my Unix system where GHC resides by asking which GHC. It will tell where GHC resides. It's residing somewhere in opt homebrew bin GHC. Okay, that is where GHC resides. Yeah, so that is where GHC is. But I'm able to say GHC, and then that runs the GHC program. Why? How does my system know where GHC lies? That is because I have actually put this opt homebrew bin GHC in a path that the system will always know. Okay, you don't need to be able to do all this, but if you are working with the system, you need to know about paths. I am actually putting this opt homebrew bin somewhere here. Yes, here I am saying set path opt homebrew bin. Opt homebrew is bin. Okay, so this is where I set my path. Okay, so therefore it automatically knows where to look for if I give just GHCI. But my lec19, which is an executable, let's get back to lec19. It is in this directory. Okay, and this is not in my path. So you need to specify the directory also. So you need to give the full path, as they say. And the full path in this case is you need to give this, but there are always some shorthands in Unix for this. Dot is a shorthand for the current directory. Okay, so you say dot slash, which means the current directory. Under the current directory, there is lec19. So execute lec19 in the current directory. Okay, so that is what you say, and that will automatically launch that program. That program will print the hello world and move to. Okay. So this is some useless bit of information it is printing. You can print whatever else you want. So you can, for instance, go here and say fibs. Let's just do the usual thing. Fibs. What was this? Okay, and I don't know. My welcome message is always to print the 50th Fibonacci number, let us say. So I'll say put string line, but I have to put on but I have to put only strings. Put string line takes a string as argument. So I can't just do Fibonacci 50. So even during, at least in my lectures, let me use the correct name, Virahanka, but it's okay. Fib 50, let's say. Okay, this won't work because Fib 50 is a number, so you have to say show. Okay, show will actually convert it into a string, and yes, that's another thing that one could do. We'll come to that in a minute. Okay, so this is my program. Come here. Let me again compile my program. And let me run the program. Yes, printing this number. Okay, so somebody has something on chat. How to do in PowerShell or CMD? Somebody is asking. Can somebody tell? Soham Chatterjee is asking how to do the same thing in PowerShell. Anybody else who is using Windows and has managed to do this? You can just unmute yourself and tell.
So in Windows, there's a setting of environment variables. You can just look it up in the search bar, and from
if you
there
want to
you
do
can.
something in the current directory, how do you do the / thing?
Yeah, it works the same way.
Oh, it works the same way. Okay. So
Yeah.
So you compile and then you just do the / this thing. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. So this is the basic thing. Okay. Let me get back to the slides. We need to still explain certain things. What is this IO and what is this funny thing here? Okay. The funny thing there, you pronounce it as unit. So let's go check for info on that. So let me now get into GHCI. And then I'll ask info on. Okay, you see that it is both a type and a data. And there are too many things which you might not be able to understand now. But the important thing is it's both a type and a value. So if you say what is the type of this, you will receive that this is both the data value and it is also the name of the type. And this data value is just it just stands for some dummy thing. Okay, it is called unit in Haskell. Okay, sometimes it's also called null, I think. Okay, or some such, but we'll call it unit. Okay, that is the correct name for it. It is called unit and its type is also called unit. Okay, and really speaking, this doesn't convey any information. It is just a placeholder, really. Okay, so this IO unit really means that I'm not returning any value here, right? When I do this, I'm just printing stuff. I'm not returning any value. This main as a function is not returning anything to you. Okay, so it's returning. So but you still need a return type. So you need something dummy there. That is why you put unit there. But you also want to prefix that unit with IO. We'll explain what it means. Okay, in a bit. Okay. So let's look at the slides. So execution of a Haskell program starts with the function main. So if I did not have main, if instead I had said, instead of calling this main, I had said IO action. Okay, and I had also called this IO action. First of all, I'm in VS Code and VS Code itself will complain. But suppose I just ignore the complaint and go ahead and then, so here I'll exit GHCI. I am in the main thing. I'll try to GHC my lec19.
Sir?
Yes.
So could you repeat what unit does? I didn't catch that.
I renamed main. There is no main there. Instead, I'm calling IO action.
The unit, the brackets, what does it do?
I'll explain it. I have written it in the slides. It doesn't do anything really. Okay. It is just there to as a placeholder. Okay. You need to give some type, so you are giving it type unit. We'll come to the number. Okay.
Okay.
But we were in the point of saying I'll remove main and you'll see what happens when I do GHC. It says action main not defined. Okay. Any program, any standalone program that you compile, it should have a main. Okay. So the moment you put it back to main, it will succeed. Okay. So okay, I've undone all my changes. I'll save this again. Let me go here and I'll do. Now it compiles. Okay. So you need main to compile properly any standalone program, and your program starts at the first line of main. Okay, that's another thing. You should have a starting point for your program. Main is the starting point for your program. Here is the first compilable program. Okay. So this is actually more primitive. So this is put string line, which will automatically put the line. Even more basic is put string. You say anything, and let's see what happens when you do put string. Okay, so come here. Okay, now let me just execute lec19. Okay, you see that? Do you see a funny symbol here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is because that is because my shell is smart enough to understand that what I have done here is put string, and it will automatically insert a new line. Okay, but if I do it on some other shell, let's say you don't need to understand what a shell means now, but let's. Do you see what is happening? It's printing hello world, and then the shell prompt is immediately following that. Okay, so it's all meshed together, you see. Okay, whereas if I change it to put string line, you will immediately see what is happening, the difference. I do that, and then I come to the shell here and say, yeah, you see, it prints hello world and it goes to a new line. Okay, so put string line means put the string on the screen and go to a new line. Put string means put the string on the screen. That's all. So it will put the string on the screen but won't go to a new line. Okay, so that is the difference. And you can simulate put string line while using just put string by doing this. Hello world, and then you put \n. \n means go to new line. Okay, that's called the new line character. Yeah, and you can come here and you can compile, and then you can run. Yeah, it will just it will go to a new line after writing. Okay, so that is your first standalone Haskell program. Okay, fine. So you save this into a file named hw.hs. You compile it using ghc hw.hs or just ghc hw. This generates some 3 new files: hw.hi, hw.o, hw. Okay, that hw will have execute permissions. The hw.hi and hw.o, you can try to see what it means, but it will be all gibberish because those are what are called binary files. Okay, so you won't even be able to see anything here. You can try to see what it is there here. Yeah, okay, so this file you don't have anything here that can be seen at all. Okay, so sorry, it's not hw.hi, lec19.hi. Cannot open, it seems. File seems to be a binary file and cannot be opened as text. Okay, so that is your problem. Okay, you can suppress errors and try to open it. Okay, so you cannot open that, so unfortunate, but that's fine. So all you care about is this dot, this lec19 file. Okay, this file that is displayed in a different color here, that's what you care about, and you want to execute that. Okay, fine. So you can run the executable command using you can run the executable file using this, // and whatever your file name is. And this I have already mentioned, GHC and GHCI, etc., etc. So you can actually check out all the options in GHC by doing GHC -- help or GHC -- show options, which will give you a huge list. And if you want, you can go and read this manual at this page. Okay. Yes.
So you said GHC makes it executable or something. Like when you write GHC, no, I didn't understand. Like what is executable? Like
executable means, okay. So let me try to explain it to you. So right, so you can do GHCI, right? You are familiar with that on the command line. What operating system do you use, Srimati?
So
I use Windows or
Windows.
Linux? Windows. So you go to PowerShell or whatever and use GHCI. How do you invoke GHCI?
I mean, I use CMD. I don't CMD, GHCI. It says GHCI or something like that.
Yeah. But CMD is, what is CMD? CMD is, will it give you something like this? Like what you see on the screen?
Yeah. Something
Where
like
you can
this.
write commands, right?
Yeah.
So GHCI is a command, right? If you do GHCI, something happens.
Yeah.
right? So let me get out of GSA. So there are lots of files here. Okay, you can see that there are lots of files here. If I do edit distance.hi, edit distance, if I say that's one of the files, will anything happen? It will say command not found. Okay, so commands are things that do something, whereas there are other files that don't do anything. They have some information stored in them. They are programs, but they themselves do not perform the actions. Okay, they are, you just written a program, it is just sitting there. Okay, whereas, so here, if I say lec19.hs, what will happen? Nothing will happen. Okay, I have to invoke some other program. I have to say some other editor name and then say open lec19.hs. Okay, so there are programs, there are files that do something. They are programs. Okay, they are programs that can immediately run. Such things are called executables. You can execute them. Okay, whereas something like lec17.hs, nothing will happen to them. You have to compile it first, and then you will have to make it into something else which can immediately run and do some action.
Okay.
Okay, so programs are things that, so you write programs into a file. Okay, that is still a program text. Okay, you want to turn it into some dynamic object that can actually do something. Okay, and that thing that can do something is what you call an executable. You can execute it. Okay, yeah. So right, so that is why, if you let me get out of this bash shell, that is why if you look at this thing with a different color, so this was not there when I wrote lec19.hs. Only lec19.hs was there. That is a text file. It is representing your program in some text form. When I do GHC, it will turn it into some other form. You don't care what that form is from, but that form can be immediately executed. Okay, and it will actually do action for you. Like when I do lec19, but I can't do lec19 because it will say lec19 command not found. You will have to say /lec19 because you have to give the full path. /lec19, if you say, it will do something. It has printed hello world, you see. That was something that the program did.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. To know more about GHC, you can always go here and look at stuff. Even I have not looked at this in forever. Not looked at this at all. You can get lots of information when you go look at this. But let us get back to the slides. And okay, that's a program. That's my hello world program. Put string accepts a string as an argument. Okay, this hello world, this \n is a string. Okay, because it is embedded inside double quotes, so that's a string. And I am putting that string on the screen. Okay, this prints the string str on the screen. Okay, so now let us come to types. So clearly it takes a string as an argument, so its input type is string. It returns something as result. No, it should have a return type. So its return type is some B, let us say. But what is its return type? Is it returning some value that you can use? Put string. Is it like factorial 50? Factorial 50 will produce a value, some whatever value, some long number, which you can then take and use. But put string, is its result a value that you can use later?
No.
No. Okay. So the return value is not used at all. So perhaps it returns nothing of significance. So in reality, every function should have a return type. So we need to give a return type here. That is why we give a dummy return type. And the dummy return type is unit. The thing with it is like an empty tuple. Okay, like pairs you will put parentheses and put 2 numbers in between. If you want to say triples, you will put parentheses and put 3 numbers in between. So if you want a 0 tuple, you will just put open parenthesis and close parenthesis. That's all. There will be nothing in between. Okay, so there is no value of significance in this, and you are just using it because you want to have something as a return type. So you're putting that as the return type. Okay, so the type open parenthesis, close parenthesis is pronounced unit. It has only one data value. Okay, and for convenience, that data value is also called unit. Okay, so unit is the data value and it is of type unit. Okay, fine. And this is used to model nothing. The fact that I have nothing of significance here. Okay. So question is, so then can we give string arrow unit as the type of put string? You cannot. Why? Because there is one value of type unit, namely this unit itself. Unit is the value which is an element of the type unit. So any program whose return type unit, whose return type is unit, should be producing the value unit at some point of time. But this put string is not producing any value of type unit. Okay, so it cannot be just unit, which is the return type of put string. Also, this fails to take into account the fact that put string somehow changes something, makes some it does some action, right? And what is the action that it does? That of printing something on the screen. Okay, so this put string is a function with some side effect. Side effect meaning it is not the main return value of the function, but it is something that else that it does along the way. Okay, that is why it is a side effect. And you need to have some means by which you capture this feature of put string, that it produces a side effect. The side effect is printing on screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So put string cannot be given type string arrow unit because it does not return the value unit. It does not return any value at all, really. Furthermore, you have to account for the fact that there is a side effect that is that this put string has a side effect, namely printing something on the screen. So therefore, you call it IO unit. Okay, IO tells you this is a program with side effects. Okay, IO meaning this is a function which has side effects. Side effect, like we saw earlier. Okay, that of printing to screen is one side effect. This is a function, as you will see, more technically called action rather than function, that has a side effect. And return value is not significant. Which is why you represented by unit. Okay, let's get back here and I'm sorry. Okay, let me just do one thing. I'll always have GHCA running in one place.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So can you explain that unit part once again? I did not.
I'll explain it.
Sir, are there functions that return unit type?
Yeah, these will be functions that return unit. There aren't any predefined functions that return unit type. You can write a function that returns a unit type. So can you write a function that returns whose return type is unit? We can try something whose return type is just unit. You can say useless function. I mean, you can't really do anything else. On any input, you just return unit. That's it. Okay. That's a function whose return type is unit. Is it clear?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So now let me go to GHC here. I have start at GHCI here. I want to check the type of put string. Okay, it says string arrow IO unit. Okay, and then if you actually provide a string, then but if you want to ask for the type of it, sorry, not this. Yeah, the type of is IO unit, because this has a side effect which is signified by writing IO, and its return type is of no significance, so you write unit. Okay. Okay, great. So somebody asked me to explain unit. Who was it?
Sir, it was me.
Can you name yourself, please? I don't.
Shubham Kumar.
Okay. So what is it that you want to know about unit? Unit is a type. Okay. So if you just say unit is a type which has only one value. Okay. And the value is also called the same, unit. Okay. So the type of unit, the value is unit, the type. Okay. It all looks confusing, but it's just a placeholder type. It is a type that you use when you have to name a return type, but the return value is not significant. Is that clear?
Yes, sir, I think so.
Yeah, here put string, there is no return value here. It is doing some side effect, namely printing something on screen, but it is not like Fibonacci 50 or whatever that produces a number. Okay, print something on screen, that's all. There is no return value, there is no value of the function that you will later use or whatever. Okay, so that is why you put unit, but then there is a side effect, so you put IO unit. Okay, that's basically it. Okay, fine. So put string is yes, Srimati.
No, I mean I didn't understand the side effect, so you put IO, that part. You said there's a side effect, so put IO.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that in a minute. Yeah, just be patient. Yeah, that comes next. IO is like a type constructor, like maybe or list or whatever. If A is a type, then maybe A is a type, list A is a type, right? So IOA is also a type like that. Okay, so IOA, you can have IOA for any A. You can have IO unit, you can have IO int, IO string, IO list of int. You can have lots of things. Okay, if anything is a type at all, then you can have IO that as another type. So IO is what is called a type constructor. It takes a type and produces a new type, just like maybe or list or whatever. Okay, good. But yeah, likewise, IOA is a type whenever A is a type. Here is the important thing though. What are all the values of type maybe A? Do you recall? Srimati? Maybe int, let us say. What are all the values of type maybe int?
I don't know. I mean, like just.
Yeah, just and x, where x is an integer, where x belongs to type int, or nothing. Okay, those are two values. Okay, so you have two what are called value constructors, namely nothing and just. Okay, they take a value and construct a new value out of it. Okay, maybe is the type constructor. It takes a type as input and produces a new type. Just and nothing are value constructors. It takes a value and produces a new value. Okay, either nothing or just x for x belonging to type A. That is for maybe. Similarly, for list, a list will either be nil, the empty list denoted by just square brackets, or it is something followed by a list, some element followed by a list. Okay, so you have constructors for all those things. Nothing and just are what are called value constructors. The difference between IO and maybe list, etc., is that the internal structure of IO is not visible to the user, nor are the constructors. You cannot construct a new IO value by applying a value constructor. There are no value constructors, etc., that are visible to you. Okay, it is just Haskell does it all internally. It just asks you to put IO. It internally takes care of certain things. Okay, If you want to
Hello,
see
sir. Hello.
yes, who is this?
Yeah, this is Aryan.
Yeah.
What is the value constructor? I don't.
This no. If you, I said maybe int is a type. So maybe is a type constructor. Int is a type. Maybe int is a new type. It produces a new type. Okay, that's a type constructor. Just and nothing produce new values. 5 is a value of type integer. Just 5 is a value of type maybe integer. So just produces a new value. It constructs a new value. So it's a value constructor.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Clearly for lists, the list forming is a type constructor, because if you have int, then you have list of int, then you have, if you have double, you have list of double, etc., etc. That produces new types from existing types. That's a type constructor. Value constructors of which produce lists are what? Either just the square bracket which produces the empty list, or the colon operator which takes an element and another list and produces a new list. So the colon operator is a value constructor, and the list forming, the empty list operator is also a value constructor. Is it clear, Aryan?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. But unlike those types, for IO, you cannot really know what the internal type constructors, etc., etc. are. This is just a conceptual view I am giving. Okay. So Haskell asks you not to bother about this. Okay. If you want, you can think about it as this. Okay. That IOA is really this. That you have real world, which is the real world really, which is all your screen, your memory inside your computer, all your whatever keyboard input you will get, all that is the, you can think of it as the real world or my computer. Give it whatever name you want. I'm calling it real world. You can think of it as whatever. It's a function that takes a real world as input and produces a new version of the real world. In the case of putstring, what is the new version of the real world? The real world includes whatever has been output on screen, you see. So in the case of putstring, the new real world is whatever the same as the old real world, except that the screen output will have one more line added to it. Is that fine? By real world, I mean everything that is relevant to your computer. Everything that is relevant to your computer is all the keyboard inputs that have been entered so far, all the mouse inputs that have been entered so far. Okay. Everything that has been printed on screen so far. Okay, that is the real world, along with the whole internal configuration of the machine. What all is stored where in the machine. So that is your real world. And once you do an input-output action, it will change the real world in some manner, and that can be thought of as returning a new version of the real world. This is the old version of the real world. This is the new version of the real world. In the case of putstring, what is the difference between the two versions of the real world? In the new version, one line of output has been added to the screen. Yes. So yeah, and there is a return value. Okay, the return value can be used by the program, but in the case of putstring, there is no return value. There is no return value of significance. So you are putting unit. Okay, so even if you extract it, you will be extracting only unit. Okay, and that is not much use really. Okay, what do you do with it? Okay, is it clear, Srimati? This idea that IOA is taking a real world, producing a new version of the real world, because you are doing side effects. Side effects means the real world itself changes, but you are also producing a value. You are producing a Fibonacci value or whatever. So
the new line is the value you're saying. You said
no, new line is not the value. The new line is a change to the real world that you have done. There is no new value at all. There is no return value in the case of putstring.
So I didn't understand actually. Like putstring, what it does is it, like real world is all the internal mechanism or something.
Real world is all the internal mechanisms plus your screen, plus your keyboard input, plus your screen output. If you think of it that way, then what is putstring doing?
I just understood.
It is adding one line to the screen. It has actually changed your screen output, right?
Oh, okay.
So that is part of the real world. So the real world has changed, but there is no value that you can use. You asked it to say hello world, it has said hello world. It's not like you called Fibonacci 50 or whatever and you have a number that you can work with. That would be the value.
A, what is A? A is the
value. A is unit. In this case, it's unit.
Oh, because you can't use it again.
Yeah, therefore it is unit. For the case of putstring, it is unit. I will show you some other thing called read line, get line. Get line will get a line. Okay, that will actually change the real world in the sense that it has consumed one more line of user input. Okay, if you want to think about it. So that is a change in the real world, but it will also have a return value. What is the return value? The string that has been read, the line that has been read, because you can use that. Okay, so it is not always that your IO will have type only IO unit. You can have IO string, you can have IO int, you can have IO whatever type. One example of IO string is this function called getLine, which doesn't have any input, but what it does, it waits for the user to enter a line and it consumes that line. Okay, and that is the return value for the function. Okay, the change in the real world is that a line has been read. Okay, so internally in your machine there will be some pointer or whatever which will keep track of how long it has read the user input, and that has advanced, that pointer has advanced. Okay, so that is really the change in the real world, but the return value is a string. Okay, we'll come to that in a minute. Okay, but is this idea of IOA being some real world arrow, real world A, is at least is this conceptually clear? This is not what is actually happening. Maybe it does it with, there is a lot more that happens with IO, but if you really go into how Haskell implements this, but you don't need all that. Conceptually, this is all you need to. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. So an object of type IOA is a function really, because it takes a real world as input and produces a real world, comma A as output. It takes the current state of the real world and produces a new state of the real world, and also a value of type A. So that is the job that any object of type IO is doing. So in other words, objects of type IO A consist of two things: a value of type A, this value that can be extracted somehow from the action, okay, from this object of type A, and a side effect. The side effect is the change on the real world that is happening. In the case of putString, the side effect is adding a line to the screen. In the case of getLine, it is consuming a line from the input buffer, as we call it. Okay. Okay. But so the way I have written it, it looks like it's a function, but technically they are not called functions, they are called actions. Okay. Okay. It is an action whose return type is IOA. An IO action's main job is to produce a side effect. Okay. But when will it produce a side effect? When you try to extract its value. That is really the point. You try to extract the value embedded in an IO action. So as I told you, it is a real world arrow, real world, comma A. So there is a side effect component to it. There is a value component to it. When you try to extract the value, it will produce the side effect and then give the value also. Okay. So any function that produces a side effect will have return type IOA. Okay. This IO is really telling you that something has changed about the status of this function. It is having a side effect. So it will be marked as IO. Okay. And once you have something marked as IO, that function cannot be embedded inside a pure function. Functions that do not have IO on them are called pure functions. Okay. These are functions that have side effects. You cannot embed a side effect, an effectful function into a pure function. But you can embed a pure function into a side effect function. For instance, we did this. We had Fibonacci, which we wrote, and then we said, okay, so that Fibonacci can be called from inside this main. Okay. But you cannot have a function that has side effects, which has been given some IO type, and then put it as part of a larger function that has no IO in it. Okay. If you put it, you have to introduce IO in the type of that larger function. Okay. Chandradeep asked a question. Chandradeep, are you here? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this answers your question. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That, if so, you want to say that any function that does not have IO in its type is pure, will not have side effects. Okay, that you can say. And anytime you have side effects, you will put IO in it, and even if you embed it inside a larger thing, that will also still carry the IO. Okay. Okay. So good. So this is all still abstract. If you look at concrete examples, it will be clear to you. Don't worry. Don't worry that things are a little too vague now. We'll look at enough concrete examples and then it will be clear. Yeah. So for putString, the side effect is that of printing the string on screen. Okay. And so putString is of type string arrow IO unit. And the first line was putString something something. You gave a string as an argument. So that has type IO unit. So main also has IO unit. Okay, we'll see why main has IO. In this case, main has type IO unit. In general, you want main to have type IOA for some A. Okay, main should always be a IO action. And okay, so we are still looking at conceptual stuff. Conceptually, there are lots and lots of side effects. Printing a string on screen, reading a user input from the terminal or input buffer, opening or closing a file, changing a directory. These are all some simple things that you would normally do when you're in your PowerShell or CMD or Unix shell or whatever. Okay, writing into a file, you can do all these. You can launch a missile. That's also a side effect. Okay, it's unlike computing Fibonacci. Okay, if you compute Fibonacci, it is an expression. Okay, this is the first time you are seeing programs which do actions. Okay, whereas till now all you had to know about Haskell was that everything is an expression. There is no statement. Okay, everything is an expression which will have a value. That's all. Okay, now you are trying to do things. Okay. Okay, so here is the distinction between put string and put string line. Put string line also adds a new line at the end of the string and it will go to a new line. Okay, so put string line string is equivalent to put string of string plus plus the new line character. Okay, we can actually, okay, so this is fine. So you can write one thing, but we have a do here. Okay, the do is a way of chaining together multiple actions. You do one action, then you do another action, then you do a third action, etc. Okay, that is what is done by do. Okay, here I have a dummy program where I'm asking, hello, what's your name? I'm saying, okay.
Sir, this IO A can be used by other programs.
Other functions? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, not only for main, other things can also have IO. We'll see examples. So, is that what you know?
If a function is returning IO integer, so can we like use from other function to call that as an integer?
I'll show you how it is done. Okay, in a minute, I'm going to show you how it is. Okay, by the end of the class, you will know. Okay. Okay, so this is two actions. You're chaining together actions by using do. Okay, so that says do that action followed by this action. Okay, that is just Haskell syntax. So do makes the actions take effect in sequential order, one after the other. Now you have a notion of order. Okay, it is not that suddenly when you do this, it will print what's your name first and then hello. Okay, it will do that in order. First do say hello and then it will say what's your name. Okay, so whereas earlier, if you write an expression like x plus y, x could be evaluated first or y could be evaluated first. It doesn't matter really, because all you have is an expression and all you want is the final value. Okay, you don't care which is evaluated first. Okay, till now the Haskell programs you wrote can all be thought of as generalizations of arithmetic expressions. Okay, instead of doing some plus etc., you have your own names, that your own home cooked functions that you can use in your expressions, and you have rewrite rules for them. Okay, till now it is rewrite rules and this thing. Now you have some actions which can be done in some order. Okay, so here, of course, when you do this, you have to indent properly. So one level of indentation is needed. If you're using VS Code or something, it will automatically indent. But if you're using some other editor, sometimes you might get into problems because of indentation. So with do, etc., you have a friendlier syntax or alternative syntax. You like C, Java, etc., you can put open braces, close braces, and you can put semicolon after every action. Okay, for actions you can do this syntax also, but I'll be following this syntax. Okay, even though this might be more appealing to you, so you can follow whichever you want. Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so like we saw earlier, actions can occur inside a let, where, if, then, else, etc., etc. So it's not like you can only do this. For instance, I can do, in fact, rather than defining fibs there, I can do it here. Okay, main equals let fibs equal in, and then I say do Yeah, I can do this. I can go here. Let me try to compile this program. That's my lect 19. So I'll say yeah, it is saying hello and then it is printing this. Okay. Why is it printing in the same line? Because I said put string, not put string line. Okay. If I had said put string line, it would print on two different lines. Yes. So now this is how you run this. Okay. Good. So you can also do where. So you can, instead of saying that, okay, so here you can, here is another thing you can do. You can say, you can do this. You can say put string line hello. You can say put string line show fibs at 50 where, and you can write your fibs definition. Let me for the moment comment. Okay, so okay, so I can do and I can say where, I can say let, things like that. I can also do if then else. We'll see examples of if then else. Okay, there are more actions. Okay, print. Okay, so here notice what I did. I have to print an integer, so I'm saying put string line, but put string line takes a string and prints it on screen. Print will take any object that can be printed and it will print on screen. Okay, it includes integers, doubles, booleans, characters, strings, list of integers, etc., all sorts of things. Okay, so in fact, instead of saying put string line show, I can say print. Anything that is showable will be printed. Okay, I'm saying print fibs of 50. Okay, this will have the same effect. 100, let us say. Each time I change the program, I change the number as well. Yeah, so it's printing. Great. Okay. So that is print. Okay. Put char will just put a single character on the screen. Get line. This is important. Get line will get a string. Okay. This is the first time when we can talk about user input as well. So if you go and if you go to this GHCI that I have here and ask for the type of get line, you will see that it has no input parameter, but it has an output value. The output type is IO string because the output value is a string, but there is a side effect of having consumed user input. So let us see how. So instead of saying put string line hello, I can say string hello, enter your name, let me say. Okay, and then I'll say okay, then I'll try to read a name, and the way to do it is to get a line. So let's assume that the user enters her name. Okay, that's on a single line on the that's a line that she enters on the keyboard and presses enter. Okay, so that's a line. So you can get a line, and when you get a line, there is a side effect which is that user input has been consumed. Okay, that is the side effect. But there is also a return value, namely whatever the user has entered, that should be stored somewhere, right? Okay, that is your return value. That is why get line is of type IO string. So that string should be stored somewhere, and the way to store it is to use a name like any other Haskell variable. But basically you're not storing something, but you're binding. You're saying get line, let me do get line. Get line will have some side effect, but it also have a value that it produces. Let me use name to denote that value. Name, okay, I don't know, username. Username is what is going to denote the input entered by the user. Okay, and the syntax is this left arrow. Okay, on your keyboard you should put a less than symbol and then a hyphen. Okay, here on this particular font it does the thing of merging the two, but if you are writing it, you will put a less than symbol and then a hyphen. That is the left arrow symbol. Okay, then you say get line. Okay, and now you can, once you've bound the name username to that whatever was gotten there, then you can use that in later. So you can say, for instance, that you can print the username. Okay, is this clear? So this is the important part. You are getting a line, you are reading a line that has been given as input, and you are using a name, username, to denote whatever the result of that reading that line is. You can use that later. Okay, I have some 9 chat messages. Okay, so people are figuring out how to do certain things in Windows. So compile this. Yes, Srimati, you have a question.
What exactly is the name doing? It's denoting the value you said. Like
it is denoting the value extracted after getLine. GetLine will read a line of user input. Okay, and it is storing it somewhere. That is that, like real world A, it is real world string. That string is there. You want to extract that value. Okay, and you want to, that value is stored somewhere in your machine. You want a way to denote that value. You want a way to refer to that value. That is what this username is. Yeah. So you have extracted the value. This is extracting the value. Okay. So let's compile this and let's see how it works. Have I saved it? Okay, now it's asking you to enter your name. So I'll say yes. So whatever name has been entered, this is what I entered. This is what it is printing. Yes. So this is very, very rudimentary user input and output. You get some user input and then you do the same thing. Okay. Get line, read a line from standard input and return is resistant. See, I'm saying return. Here there is a return value. If you go back here, yes. So for put string, the type is real world arrow, real world unit. For get line, it is real world arrow, real world comma string. Okay, and you can have a lot of other things as well, but this is only about reading strings. What if you want to read a number? Most often you will want to read a number from the user. For that, Okay, get char will get a character. Okay, so right here, this is I'm talking about binding. Get line is of type IO string. Is there a way to use the return value? Yes. So you need to bind the return value to an object of type string and use it elsewhere. Binding is this. Okay, this left arrow. Please type your name. You're saying, and then you are binding the name to the name n, to the variable name n, and then you're saying hello plus plus n. That will print out. Okay. Note that you cannot use this. You cannot say put string line hello plus plus get line. Okay, because get line is not a pure function. So hello plus plus you can only do to string. Okay, if you get line is not an expression of type string. Okay, get line is an action from which a string can be extracted, and the way to extract is to do n arrow get line. Now that answers Bijayan's question. You can have other functions whose type is IO int, and then when you want to use that value here, you have to say n that left arrow, that function name. Is it clear?
Oh, okay, sir.
Yeah, so this is not a, this is the wrong usage, because getLine is not a string. GetLine is not an expression whose type is string. Rather, it's an action whose type is IO string, meaning you can extract a string from it, but it itself is not a string. So therefore, you have to do it this way. You have to extract the string and then yeah. Okay, so here is another useful this thing. I can say enter your name and then I will say hi, welcome to Haskell. This is some stupid simple program, but there is something minor. There is some irritation here, which is that. So let me comment out this portion. Yeah. So let me say. By the way, I needn't necessarily put this type in here. Yeah, the last line should be an expression. You cannot just do this. You can just do get line. Okay. Yeah, you can just say get line, but you cannot extract and leave it at that. If you extract something, you should use it later. Okay. Your last line in your chain of do cannot be this thing. And in this case, the type of main is main IO string, you see. The point is the type of main or the type of any do block is the type of the last action. Okay, that is the rule. If I have a do block, what is the type of the overall do block? It is the type of the last action. Okay, and main is this do block. So the last action is get line, so it is saying IO string. Okay, but we want to go beyond. We want to say n get line. Okay, great. So that's a program. Okay, it's saying enter your name. I'm entering my name. Then it says this, but there's something unsatisfactory, which is that I'm entering my name on the line after the thing. So usually you want to write a prompt and ask me to enter my name right there. Okay, right here. I should be allowed to enter my name here rather than going there. And for that, what should I do? I should do put string rather than put string line. So let me put string there. I'm not getting anything at all. It should say enter your name, no? It is not saying that. But if I say Suresh, then it will say enter your name and then hi Suresh, welcome back. So this is an irritant if you do put string, okay? But if I do the same thing in GHCI, I have GHCI here, I can reload my function, okay? Now I do main, it says enter your name, and right here it allows me to say Suresh, then it says hi Suresh. What is the difference? The difference is some minor irritant which you just need to know what to do here, okay? So we would like to let the user enter their name on the same line as the prompt. So you use put string instead of put string line. It works as expected in GHCI, but in GHC there is a problem. It happens like this: you enter Suresh and then it says enter your name and then Azra. The point is that IO is usually buffered. Okay, buffered meaning the computer doesn't constantly keep sending something to screen. Okay, it will send it in batches. Okay, something should prompt it to send to the screen. Usually it is the enter. If the user makes the enter, hits the enter on the keyboard, then that is one prompt that will let the program send a bunch of stuff to the screen. Okay, till that it will wait. It will not send it character by character immediately. Okay, and therefore till you do this enter, it is not seeing that, it is not sending that enter your name also. Okay, but earlier if you put string line, that is fine because that is a new line. Okay, new line is another prompt that asks the system or whatever your program to send output to the screen. Okay, so barring any of these prompts, it will just keep waiting. Okay, so that is why with buffered in output you will get this kind of behavior. So this is just one small trick. If you want to use such things, you have to prohibit explicit buffering. For that you have to go to system.io and then just do this set buffering standard out, no buffering. STD out means standard output. Standard output in the case of our laptops and all is the screen. Okay, so for the standard output, follow that there is no buffering. Okay, if you do that, then it will automatically work. So let me see. This is just a curiosity which you need to know if you are using this. Nothing very deep happening here. You just need to remember this. To use this, you have to say and that will automatically, if it's VS Code, it will automatically import all this. Or you can just say system import system.io and then leave it at that. Okay, that is also fine. So now it will work as expected everywhere. Okay. Yeah, it's asking enter your name. I don't know. So how do you spell your name? Srimati.
That's Srimati.
Okay. So, right. So great. Okay. So this is very, very basic stuff till now. Okay. Fine. Okay. Right. So this is interesting. So now I need to be able to. So now I can do one thing, two things, three things, etc. But suppose I want to do something 10 times. What do I want to do 10 times? I want to print something. I want to get an input and I want to print it 10 times. Okay. So let us see how it works. Let's say I ask this, and I get line, and then I have to print 10 times whatever has been written. Okay. I'll say print, I don't know. So go 10 times. Where go is go 10, I can say. Just okay, I'm doing this. Okay, go I. If you want to print, so if you want to print once, you can just print it. What if you want to print more than once? I times, let us say. Then what will you do?
Replicate. Oh no, you can use that.
There is no replicate is only to produce lists. No, I want to repeat. So you do very, very explicit stuff here, right? You are good. Replicate M is something that we saw earlier. So, but let's not try to use that yet. You chain actions. You do say do, then put string line once. Followed by, what do you do now?
Go I minus 1.
Recursion.
Yes, go I minus 1. So you can also do recursion inside actions. Okay. You're just going back to go I minus 1. Okay. So instead of giving it the name go, you can give it a better name. In the slides, I'm giving it a better name. This is the thing. So this will actually print however many number of times you want. So it will print 10 times whatever you enter. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's asking. No marks for guessing. Yeah. So it's printing LeBron names 10 times. Okay. Good, cool, right? So I mean, this is a little bit primitive, but it's still fine. You can still do things repetitively. Okay, rather than chaining action 10 times. Now you can imagine that if you have to do 100 times, this is a much better thing to do than actually writing it out 100 times. But there is still something unsatisfactory. My base case here is 1 rather than 0. If it is 0, then I shouldn't even be doing anything, right? Okay, there should be a way of saying don't do anything. But if I don't do anything, that's an action. What is the return type of your put string? Some unit. If I don't do anything, I can represent that by just writing unit, saying there is nothing of significance here. But if I just say unit, it is of type what? So I would put something dummy there. I'll put unit. But that's problematic because what is the type of unit?
Unit. Right.
Yeah. What do I want though? In all this thing, the type that I want here is IO unit. Okay. So I need somewhere to promote a value of type unit to a value of type IO unit. Right. And that is called, the way of promoting that is called return. Okay. Return is a function that promotes something. It can actually promote many things. It can promote an integer to list int by singleton list int. For instance, you can come here and you can say return 5 of type list integer, or return 5 of type maybe integer. It will just print just 5. I could similarly say return 5 of type IO integer, but it won't be able to print it. Oh, it is able to print it. Okay, it has extracted the value. But there is a similarly here. So I should do return unit of type IO unit. When it prints it out, it won't even print out anything because there is nothing to print. Okay, so ideally, I need to put some dummy thing there. And the only dummy thing we know till now is unit, but I have to make the types match. So I use a return function. The return function promotes any value from a smaller type to a higher type. That's all it does. It is not like the return in your other, for people who are programmed in other languages like C, Java, etc., etc. Return there is a control statement. It returns control from the called function to the calling function. There is nothing of that sort here. Return is just promoting a value from some type to a higher type. Okay, so return. So you could actually do, instead of this, you could say if it's 0n, you do return. Yeah. Otherwise, you do all this. This is still fine. Okay. You can print it 100 times.
So
yes.
When we have the print often thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it outputs an IO. And and so like the IO can be,
What do you mean by its outputs and IO?
I mean the output type is IO and it does a side effect plus a return time of unit.
Yeah, it has a side effect. The return type is unit, meaning there is no return value at all.
Right. So like in the recursive case,
Yeah.
a function is defined under a do, and under the do there's a put string line and a recursion. So if
Are you saying in the slides?
yes, in the slides.
Yeah.
So if we wanted, we could have multiple put string lines or something like that.
Yeah. You can have multiple put string lines. Yes.
So for the 0 case, why can't we just have no put string lines and call that a side effect?
Yeah, but you have to have it something, here. That is why I'm calling return empty unit. That is really doing that. Return unit is not do. Return unit has the side effect of not doing anything. It will return the return value of a dummy unit. Nothing there. You don't want anything to happen, but you want the types to match, which is why you put return empty. Sorry, return unit.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So here I'm explaining unit, why it should be return unit. So it's achieved by the return function. It's a way to promote the value unit from type unit to IO unit. Okay, and that's it. So if V is a value of any type A, return V is of type IOA, and you will notice that it is not just of type IOA. You can also use return to promote A to maybe A or A to list A, etc. Not to be confused with the return, which is a statement in languages like C, Java, etc., which returns control to the calling program from the called program. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so X binding return E to X, return E will return return will first promote E to a higher type, but then if you are extracting it, you are just extracting the value of E. Okay, so and then doing act is just the same as saying let X equal to E in act. Okay, I'll let you think about that. Okay, so here is the proper printing 100 times function. Okay, now I have a final thing, which is, yeah, more of the same really. So here, for instance, I can implement get line using get char. Okay, and that is how I do it. My get line, I can say. I'll first get a character. Okay, get char will consume a character from the screen, from the user input, and you are binding it to the name C. Okay, if C is the empty, is the new line character, then you have to stop. If I immediately press enter, you have to return the empty string. Empty string is the nothing has been entered, so it is the empty string, and then you have to promote its value, so you say return empty string. Else what do you do? You have to do my get line again, right? Because in the case where it is the new line character, you stop, otherwise you continue. But doing my get line will give you what? It will give you a result, right? Because my get line has to give you a string. So you have to bind that string to something. So else C is equals my get line. Else do, I would say.
So what exactly is my get line?
My get line is a thing that I am trying to write, which will read a whole line of input from the user. I am using get char, which will read one character from the user.
And like the job is to just read the line.
Yeah, the job is just to read the line and return it in this return value. There is a return value whose type is string.
Okay.
Okay. So if I do it, then I'll have to, whenever there is a return value, you bind it to a name by using the left arrow. So my get line has a return value, bind it to C's. But now what do you need to do? I have already read a character which is C, and I have further read some my get line which is C's. So now what is the overall thing that you need to return? I first read a C, then I read some C's. What is it that you should now, what is the return value now? First read a C, then there is C's. So the return value should be, remember that, C colon C's, because character strings are nothing but lists of characters, right? So you have to do C colon C's, but C colon C's is just of type string. You want something of type IO string. So what do? You promote. You say return C colon C's. That's it. Okay. So this is implementing getLine in terms of. So I'm saying this recursion need not just be driven by numbers, I times I minus 1 times, right? It can be a forever recursion which is stopped by some condition here. The condition here is C equals new line. Yeah. Don't worry if you feel that it's a little quick. We'll go over some of these things on Thursday's class again. Yeah, return C colon C, somebody said. Aren't there any loops in Haskell? Yes, somebody is asking. You are doing explicit recursion instead of looping. There are loopings in Haskell which we'll look at in the next class. Okay, there are some more. This is too primitive. In the next class, we'll look at ways to make it a little more palatable. Ishan, is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Yes.
So like this is again the same thing sort of, but under do,
Yeah.
what if you have different many more than one?
No, what do you mean by under two? Under true.
Under do.
Under two. What is two?
So do.
Under do. Okay. Yeah, under do. Yes.
Right. So what if you have like multiple side effect functions, and those have
What is
different.
that? Yeah, instead of getLine, you can put some strings and then getLine. That is fine.
Yes, sir. I mean you can put strings. So, but what if you have like some function with a return type? Like suppose instead of IO unit, it's IO string.
That is what I am doing. No, here I am returning I am doing return of the empty string. Here I did return of unit. Here I am doing return empty string.
Yes, sir, but
Return meaning promote it to type IO this time.
okay, I think I'm not.
Yeah, here again. So this my getLine is of type IO string. So I am binding its value here. You see, and then I am getting a string again. I am doing return of that.
Yes, sir, but in Go, in is equal to do. You're not returning because both string line is returning.
No. What do you mean by returning?
So I mean when you're doing Go in is equal to do.
No. That is because here the recursion call is the last thing. Whereas here I am first doing the recursion and then I have to do something.
Okay.
It is just the structure of my recursion.
Okay.
See, I could have, if you want the same structure, I can accumulate whatever I have read so far in a string and then finally I'll just print a string.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it is just that the structure of the two things are different. I need to do the recursive call, which will return a value, and I need to come back and then build something on top of it. Yeah, okay. Whereas here I don't need to do that. I just need to there is nothing like getting back and then constructing a value because it's just unity. You see the difference now?
Yes. So in all cases, like you'll have to return somewhere, like do the return.
Yeah, finally. Yeah, right. But here you don't need to because
because all the returns are stacking. Okay.
Okay, great. So what did I want to do now? Yeah, similarly here. I mean, yeah, this repetition is just like yeah, it needn't just be yeah, I'm just saying that this is a general pattern. Given any operation A, given any action A, I can write a function n times that will repeat that action so many times, where n is the number given by the first argument. Okay, so for instance, I can say main equals n times 100 of, and I can give a whole action here, and that action could be something. Yeah, this is very nice. This will take an input and return and print it out. Okay, so that's an interactive task. So this is the basic task. You see, do input is bound to get line, and then I am putting the input. I'm reading an input, putting it back. Okay, that I am doing 100 times. And what is this n times 100? N times 100 is saying n times is the thing that lets you repeat an action so many times, given by the first argument. Okay, and the first, and that program is here. Okay, if it is 0, you just return unit. Otherwise, you first do the action A and then do n times n minus 1. Is this clear? We can program this, and once we see it run, we can stop with that. Okay. Yeah, but I've written this my get line. 1 second, I'll show this and then I'll entertain your question. So who has a question to ask? Vijay? No, Vijay. No. Yes. Yes, please ask. No, I can't hear you. You are muted or some such.
We have get char for character and
Get line for a line. Yes. So let me just.
integer. Like, is there something like that to accept integer?
No, sorry, it all got
Okay,
cut.
I'm just writing it as a comment.
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to invoke this my get line. Let us see how it works. Okay, it will let me. Okay, so you can put anything. Okay, so you write something, it will read the whole line and it will, okay, it will return it as a string. Okay, great. So that is my get line. Let's try to read and write something 100 times. So pointless task, but still, and for that I need to implement something called n times, which I have written in the code. We have get char for character and get line for a string. How do we accept IO integer? We'll do it in the next class. Okay.
Okay, sir.
You have to use something called read ln. Read line, and then you have to but explicitly give the type that you want to read it as, because it has to, Haskell has to read it as a string, but then parse it as an integer. Okay.
Like this sort of task has also been done in Java. So I hope the process is similar. Like
So you say read ln and then you say : IO int. That earlier in the past things I have some random size, random number, etc. You'll see that I have done a read ln. Some of the mains in the earlier thing will have a read line : IO int. So you can do that.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
In the next class we'll see that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, this is done. Now I can write my main to be so I'll say 10 times useless. Why not? Let me use my get line. And I can do anything here. I can put the string line reverse of. Okay, I'm reading 10 lines and I'm printing the reverses as I read. Okay, it's expecting me to put a string. I'll say 1. This is totally useless. If I want to make it useless, at least I should earn punya for my last days. And as you expect, when I do such nice things, I will get spelling mistakes. That is the extent of my current punya, as you can see. Okay, and why not? Okay, I think, is that the last word? No, it is not the last word. Then. Okay, great. So I think I think you had a reasonable class. I hope. If there are any questions you ask, anyway, we can go over some of the things in the next class. Some of these n times, etc., we'll go over it again in the next class, and then I'll move on to better ways of, slightly better ways of doing these things rather than doing explicit loops, etc. This will just be an exposure, and then you can actually then try to, I'll give you some mild exercises in the next assignment involving IO that will help you familiarize with this more. And then, yeah, so that should be more or less the thing. And then I'll just do a final month will be spent in doing some, or final 6 classes or whatever we have will be spent in doing some data structures. Okay. Which is again nice and mathematical and pure Haskell and so on. So which we'll see. Yes. Okay, great. So what font do you use? Someone is asking, what font do I use for what? Do you mean the slides font, or do you mean
No, sir, in VS Code, like your
okay,
that arrow thing.
This is called Fira code. Okay, that's a free font. You can go and download it.
Fira code, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fira code. So as you can see here, somewhere, yeah, Fira code is there. Yeah. That's a free font which you can install. It's nice. It has lots of ligatures, as they call it. For the arrows, it will join them, etc., etc. Do all that. Okay, great. Any questions? Anybody else has a question?
Not a question, sir, but sorry, Vijay.
No, sir. Tell me.
Yeah. So IO integer, I used readline and it worked. But is readline applicable only to the what we write in the terminal, or is it also applicable to asking from a function? If a function is returning IO integer, how to implement that?
Oh, no. If a function is returning IO integer, then you have to do this input myGetLine kind of thing. So you have to bind the name here. For instance, I could say, okay, I get your point. Suppose I say there is some way by which you can produce an IO integer. You can produce an integer, let us say. Yes. If you want to use that integer elsewhere, is that what you are asking?
Yeah. For
that is what something similar is what you are doing. This myGetLine is a function that I wrote.
Yes.
It is of type IO string. I am using that here by writing input bound myGetLine. Similarly, you should use for my IO int, etc., etc. That random int or whatever function that produces a random integer, you use it elsewhere by doing bound like this, n left arrow random integer or whatever you want to say.
Oh, okay, sir.
We'll see it in the next class. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So and I have put up the slides for the next class already, so you can check it if you want. Okay. Srimati, did you have a question?
No, sir. In the slides, sir, could you just go to your slide 1 second?
Slide 1.
No. Previous page. So could you keep going back? I'll tell you when to stop. Before. Yeah. Could you explain the last line next class?
I'll explain the last line in the next class. Okay. I'll do that. Yeah. Because in some sense, binding and returning are inverses of each other. When you return something, you are if you have a value e, doing return e will just keep the same value but turn it into type IOA. Let us say originally e is a string. Let us say if e is string, return e will be of type IO string. So when I bind x is bound to return e, what I'll do is I'll go into the action and extract its value and put it in. The value is e. Okay. So it is just like saying let x be equal to e in action. So later in action I'll be using x. Okay. That is similar to saying let x equal to e. Because this return e is not really an action. It is just promoting e to some IO object, but that IO object does not have any side effect. So instead, you can bypass this whole thing and just say let X equal to E.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you are not clear, I'll explain it again in the next class. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. If that is all, then I can stop the class. Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah. I'll.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
End away too.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sure.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.